opinion say aye. To the contrary, no. The ayes have it. Senator Gallagher.
Thank you, Mr President. My question is to the Minister for Families and Social Services, Senator Ruston. Minister, what is the economic impact of the Morrison government's reduction of JobKeeper in 24 days' time?
The Minister for Families and Social Services, Senator Ruston.
Thank you, Mr President, and thank you, Senator Gallagher, for your question. First of all, I would reiterate that the government is extending the payments to people who are on unemployment benefits with the extension of the coronavirus supplement from the end of September until Christmas. Any assertions that there is anything other than an extension of a payment, an extension of a payment is actually false and misleading. As I said yesterday, every single person in this chamber, who came in here in March when we put forward a massive package of reforms—
Senator Wong, on a point of order.
A point of order is direct relevance. I know the minister is reading from a prepared brief. The question went to the reduction. Those were the words used, the reduction of JobSeeker.
Senator Wong,
I ask you to return to the question.
That's not a point of direct relevance. Senator Cormann, on the point of order.
One should never mislead the chamber, but certainly one should never mislead the chamber in a point of order. JobSeeker is not being reduced; it's being absolutely not reduced. The coronavirus supplement is being extended. JobSeeker remains precisely as it was.
I think order. I'll rule on the point of order when there's silence. This is traditionally a time the opposition values. I'll rule on the point of order. Senator Wong, that goes to the terminology and the substance of an answer, which is a matter for debate. I cannot instruct a minister how to answer a question. The minister is being directly relevant. Senator Ruston.
Thank you very much, Mr President. And what I would say is that the assertions that are made by those opposite just clearly show that they do not understand what they actually voted for themselves when they were here in this place. And secondly, Senator Wong, I'm quite happy to take that interjection. In fact, I'm quite happy to continue to answer this question without even looking down, Senator Wong. But there you go. You can waste as much time as you like in the answering of this question by your interjections. That's entirely up to you. But Mr. President, I mean, those opposites show their extraordinary ignorance of understanding of the budgetary process and the economy if they think that one measure in isolation is going to actually tell them the answer to. The impact of the suite of measures that are put in place by our government has enabled this economy to be cushioned through a once-in-a-century pandemic that totally has destroyed the economies of every country around the world. And Australia yesterday demonstrated that despite the fact that Australia and Australians have been significantly impacted by this coronavirus, we have actually fared very well on the basis of the economic stimulus that our government put in place in March to support all Australians, individuals and businesses throughout the pandemic.
Senator Gallagher, a supplementary question.
Thank you, Mr President. After the biggest economic quarterly contraction on record, the Morrison government has already accepted that we'll see further contraction in the next quarter. Minister, this is the fourth or fifth time I've asked you this question. What is the economic impact of the Morrison government's reduction of JobSeeker and the coronavirus supplement in 24 days' time?
Senator Ruston.
Thank you very much, Mr President. Well, look, once again, you're probably directing your question in relation to economic impact to the wrong minister. I make my decisions on what the money that is provided through the stimulus.
My
advice to government in relation to the initiatives that are put in place around social policy on the basis. You'd like me to divulge ERC discussions now, would you? I make my decisions when it comes to social policy on the basis of putting in place the economic supports that people need, depending on the circumstances that are before them. And right now we are in the midst of a pandemic, and the government made a decision and was announced in July that we would continue to provide additional levels of support to people who find themselves unemployed until Christmas. My decisions are always based on the social impact and the social imperatives of the people that I represent.
Senator Gallagher, a final supplementary question.
Extraordinary. Thank you, Mr President. With the 1.5 million Australians relying on support and 13 applicants for every single job, Why is it that the minister can't tell us what the economic impact is of cutting economic support or cutting financial support for those on JobSeeker with the coronavirus supplement? Does the minister take any responsibility for making the recession deeper and longer by cutting the coronavirus supplement and cutting wages at the worst possible time?
Senator Ruston.
Well, look, thank you very much, and Mr. President, and thank you, Senator Gallagher, for your question. But once again, it just shows your lack of understanding about government budgeting processes and how the economy actually works. To actually take one single payment, one single initiative, and expect that one initiative to be the single thing that impacts on the economy just shows a complete lack of understanding about how economics works and how our budget works. Clearly this government has put in place the largest ever stimulus package to support the economy through the coronavirus pandemic. We have put in place initiatives that support people who are unemployed, people to remain engaged with their employer, small businesses, large businesses, sectors of the economy that have been massively impacted. We have put in $314 billion worth of support to the Australian economy, and yet all those opposite can do is ask me a question about one little tiny part of it. Shows your lack of understanding.
Order. Order. On my left, Senator Wong. Senator Wong. Senator Keneally. Senator Antic is on his feet waiting to ask a question. Senator Antic.
Thank you, Mr. President. My question is to the Minister for Employment, Skills, Small and Family Business, Senator Cash. Can the minister update the Senate on how the Morrison government is working to get Australians back into jobs and on the road to economic recovery?
The Minister for Employment, Skills, Small and Family Business, Senator Cash.
Thank you, Mr. President, and I thank Senator Antic for the question. Mr. President, as we all know, the COVID-19 pandemic has had a devastating impact on Australia, Australians, the global economy, and it has seen Australia fall into recession. But the Morrison government moved decisively, in fact, as Minister Ruston has articulated earlier this year, to stop the spread of COVID-19, protecting the health of Australians, but also we moved decisively to protect the livelihood of Australians through our measures such as JobKeeper, which is of course keeping that really important connection between around 3.5 million Australians, between them as employees and their employers. Mr. President, nearly all Australians have had their lives impacted in some way or another by COVID-19, but in particular it is still having a significant impact on certain sectors of Australia. And in that regard, I note what is occurring in Victoria, where so many are still subject to very strict lockdown measures. But, Mr. President, as large parts of our economy begin to reopen in the coming months, the government is focused on getting Australians back into work. And, Mr. President, our JobMaker plan will return Australians to work and help Australians' economy return to growth. Every minister, every department, led by the Prime Minister from the top, we are working to put job creation front and centre of everything we do. And, Mr. President, our long-term, because we have a long-term plan for Australians, unlike those opposite, all they have is just frivolous comments. Our long-term plan to get Australians back into work will actually chart the way forward for a new generation of economic success. And of course, Mr. President, we will continue to build on this plan. We'll undertake that important skills reform that I've referred to, the industrial relations reform, removing unnecessary red tape, and of course delivering a record infrastructure spend, because when you invest in infrastructure, as we all know, you create jobs. Locking in affordable and reliable energy, boosting our manufacturing capability, and of course, as Senator Birmingham well knows, opening new export markets to create even more opportunities and jobs.
A supplementary question.
Thank you, Mr. President. Minister, how has the government's strong record of economic management and job creation enabled us to respond to COVID-19 and plan for economic recovery from a position of strength?
Senator Cash.
Well, Mr. President, I do remind those on this side of the chamber of the promise that those opposite took to the last election for Australian people, $387 billion in new taxes. Can you only imagine? Can you only imagine the position that Australians would now be in if those opposite had been able to legislate $387 billion in new taxes? And you know what the irony is? They stand here and they say they are the friends of small and family businesses. The last thing they they need are more taxes, which is exactly what you had said you would promise them, and perhaps that's why they didn't vote for you. But, Mr President, we entered COVID-19 from a position of economic strength and record employment. In fact, the employment figures in March 2020 showed that employment in Australia was actually at a record high of in excess of 13 million people. And, Mr President, that is why we continue to focus on job creation front and centre
Order,
of
Senator
policy.
Cash. Senator Antic, a final supplementary question. Order. Senator Watt and McKenzie. Senator Antic.
Thank you, Mr President. Minister, can you please update the Senate on the recent ABS labour force figures and any insights they provide into the nation's recovery from COVID-19?
Senator Cash.
Well, thank you, Mr President. Despite the devastating impact that COVID-19 has had on our economy, the ABS labour force figures for the month of June and July, they actually demonstrate the ongoing resilience of employers out there and the ongoing resilience of the Australian labour market. In fact, during June and July, as we know, we actually saw the reopening of many parts of the Australian economy. Direct correlation with the easing of restrictions is the movement of people back into work. And in those 2 months, we saw the economy create 340,000 jobs. In fact, in July alone, full-time employment increased by 43,500 and part-time employment rose by 71,200. And as Senator Payne knows, this includes almost 60,000 jobs, Senator Payne, for women in July and almost 56,000 jobs for young people. And that is why we are focused on job-creating policies and putting in place those economic conditions that businesses can lever off, create more jobs
time for the answers expired. Senator Chisholm.
Thanks, Mr President. My question is to the Minister for Sport, Senator Colbeck. The Prime Minister claims his only involvement in the rorted Community Sport Infrastructure Grants program was to pass on, and I quote, representations made to us as every Prime Minister has always done. But the Auditor-General last night told the Select Committee on Administration of Sports Grants he had never previously seen so much interaction between a Prime Minister's office and the Minister across the entire duration of a grants program. What was the Prime Minister's true involvement in this program?
The Minister for Youth and Sport, Senator Colbeck.
Thank you, Mr President. Thank the Senator for his question.
Order.
Mr President, the Prime Minister's involvement in the program is as he has described it.
Senator Chisholm, a supplementary question. Order. Senator Chisholm.
You decided you're going to go out with a bang, have you?
The ANAO also revealed the then Minister's office drafted notes for a meeting with the Prime Minister that included, and I quote, how many additional projects in marginal and target seats could be funded? Was the Community Sport Infrastructure Grants program funding increased to allow the Prime Minister to make more pork barrelling announcements?
Senator Colbeck.
Mr President,
Order.
thank you, Mr President. I think it's quite unsurprising that a minister who's looking to promote funding into their portfolio would meet with the Prime Minister proposing to do exactly that, Mr President. I've done that a number of times in my portfolios, Mr President, and the record of that is public to see $1.5 billion into aged care for COVID-19, Mr President. So I think it's quite unsurprising that a minister would go to a meeting with the Prime Minister to advocate for additional funding into a program that had received significant—
Senator Wong on a point of order.
Point of order. The minister is not answering the—
Order, Senator Rennick. I hear Senator Wong's point of order.
I'm happy to sit down for Senator Rennick.
Senator.
Go on.
Tell us
Sorry, it's Thursday. I apologise.
a week when no one went home, too, I know. So, Senator
Thank
Wong.
you. Point of order is on relevance. The minister is avoiding the question by talking in the abstract. He was asked a very direct question whether or not this program was increased to allow the Prime Minister to make more pork barrelling announcements, and I'd asked him to return to the question.
Senator Cormann on the point of order.
Thank you very much, Mr. President. The minister is being directly relevant to the extent that he can be directly relevant as somebody who was not the minister at the time. So, I mean, direct relevance has got to be seen in the context of who is being asked the question, and Senator Colbeck is answering the question in a directly relevant way to the extent he can, given he was not the minister at the time and was not involved in this process at the time.
On the point of order, the minister was asked about a meeting. It contained somewhat loaded terminology, and I've said before, when there are very specific questions seeking fact, being directly relevant requires a very strict interpretation. When these more loaded and contested terminology, ministers have more discretion in responding and remaining directly relevant, including challenging the assertions. The minister is being directly relevant in my view, and I'll call him to continue his answer. Senator Colbeck.
Thank you, Mr. President. As I was about to say, Mr. President, this was a very, very popular program, Mr. President. In the first round, there were over 2,000 applications, Mr. President. And given the popularity of the program, Mr. President, I'm not surprised that the then minister, went back to ERC and the Prime Minister
Order, Senator
to seek
Colbeck.
additional
Time
funding.
for the answer has expired. Senator Chisholm, a final supplementary question.
Thanks, Mr. President. Given the Prime Minister was clearly able to devote so much time and attention to the rorting of sports grants, where was the time, attention or colour-coded spreadsheet for aged care?
I'll allow the minister. I've long been of the view that ministers should be given the chance to respond to questions which contain assertions. I will say that's very difficult. That is getting close to not being a supplementary question in my view, dealing with effectively a different portfolio as well as and it happens to be the minister's other one. But I'm not going to rule it out of order. I'm just going to say I think it comes very close to the line. Senator Colbeck will have an opportunity to respond.
Thank you, Mr. President, and I really have no choice but to reject the complete premise of the question, Mr. President. The decisions with respect to sport funding made in the previous parliament, Mr. Question, in the previous parliament, well, Mr. President, the decisions made in the previous parliament, which I were not party to, but Mr. President, I believe, and from the understanding that I have, all the decisions made to increase the funding for this program were appropriately made through the ERC process, and accordingly the grant program and the program was administered from there.
Senator Siewert.
Mr. President, my question is to the Minister representing the Treasurer, Senator Cormann. When asked on the ABC Breakfast, he would bring forward personal tax cuts. Mr. Frydenberg said, that is one issue we are considering. We did legislate the tax cuts after the last election. They were in 3 stages. More money in people's pockets means more spending, and more spending means more jobs. In a recession, why would the government hand out tax cuts and put money in the pockets of millionaires while cutting the coronavirus supplement when a higher job seeker payment is a fail-safe way of stimulating the economy and helping the most vulnerable in our community?
Minister representing the Treasurer, Senator Cormann.
Thank you very much, Mr. President. I can confirm that the government is considering lower taxes for hard-working Australians. That's what we always do, because we understand that providing tax incentives for Australians to work hard and get ahead helps the economy grow, which creates more opportunity for all Australians to get ahead. And we want to create more jobs so that more people can get off welfare back into work. That's what we want to do. The coronavirus supplement was put in place for a 6-month period. At the $550 level. That was always temporary. It was historically unprecedented crisis-level support. It is very important now for Australia to move out of the crisis settings into the new normal. And we want to ensure that all Australians have the best possible opportunity to get back into work, which is of course why the policy put forward by Senator Ruston enables those Australians on JobSeeker to earn more before they lose any of that income support. In fact, Senator Ruston has put forward a policy, which is a very good policy, to increase the amount of income they can earn to $300 $300 a fortnight, $300 a fortnight that people can earn instead of $105 a fortnight before they lose any of their job seeker support. We are a government that encourages people to have a go. We are a government that rewards people that have a go, and that is how we strengthen the economy and help the economy recover as a result after this coronavirus pandemic.
Senator Seward, a supplementary question.
Does the minister reject the concept from economists that actually giving money to people with low incomes goes into the economy quicker to stimulate the economy, whereas giving money to millionaires, it gets saved?
Senator Cormann.
Thank you very much, Mr. President. I completely reject this class warfare rhetoric, which was also rejected by the Australian people at the last election. I mean, in the lead-up to the last election, the Greens had somehow captured the then leader of the Labor Party into this sort of attack on aspirational Australians, or those Australians who had done well. We want all Australians to do well, and we want all Australians to have the best possible opportunity to get ahead. We want all Australians to have the best opportunity to get into work, to pursue a career, and to be the best they can be. We are not going to join you in this sneering approach to policy. We are a government that will continue to ensure that the tax policy settings provide an appropriately well-targeted safety net for the vulnerable, but also provides the appropriate incentive for people to have a go and do the best they can.
Senator Seward, a final supplementary question.
Minister, what do you say to the 1.8 million people on JobSeeker and Youth Allowance who won't see a cent of tax cuts and are facing their income, a cut in their income of $300 a fortnight?
Senator Cormann.
Thank you very much, Mr. President. The stronger economy that our tax policies will help create will get those people back into work. We want those Australians to get off-income support, off-crisis-level income support, back into a job. And you know what's happening right now? There are lots of jobs out there. Where businesses can't find anyone to take that job on. That is a terrible situation.
Order.
And that is why we need to start making
Senators
those
on my
adjustments.
right.
That's why we need
Senator
to start
Seward.
phasing out the crisis-level support that was provided to job seekers in the context of the initial 6-month period. That is absolutely the right and responsible thing to do, because it will help us strengthen the economy, it will help us create more jobs, it will help us ensure that those Australians who are currently on income support will be able to get a job and look after their family and get ahead.
Order. Order. Senator Patrick.
Mr. President, my question is to the Foreign Minister. I preface my question by recalling the remarks of former Foreign Minister Julie Bishop, who, a week out from the 2016 US presidential election, observed that the then candidate, Mr. Donald Trump, was domestically focused and that it would be, I quote, up to our region, including Australia, to persuade a Trump administration to focus on the Asia-Pacific. Now that you've been the Foreign Minister for 2 years, how is that project going? How successful have you and the Prime Minister been in persuading President Trump to focus positively on our region? How has President Trump's diplomacy helped Australia's interest in the Asia-Pacific?
The Minister for Foreign Affairs, Senator Payne.
Thank you very much, Mr. President, and I thank Senator Patrick for his question. I think the best way to respond to Senator Patrick is in fact to refer to some of the singular outcomes of the 2020 AUSMIN meeting held recently in Washington between Secretary of State, Secretary of Defence Pompeo and Esper, and Minister Reynolds and myself. Because the Indo-Pacific was the principal topic of our discussion in Washington, Mr. President. We reached agreement on a wide range of issues, and let me start just with the deployment of an affordable, safe and effective COVID-19 vaccine, if one is achieved, and therapeutics to the Indo-Pacific region. What that builds on, Mr. President, is early US support with Australia and New Zealand for the distribution of key medical and health supplies from Suva to the Pacific at the beginning of the COVID-19 pandemic. We agreed our global health security statement, which will also help us build Indo-Pacific partner capacity in biosecurity, in biosafety and in biosurveillance to prevent, detect and respond to infectious disease outbreaks. And importantly, to reduce the risk of future pandemics, we agreed to establish a new working group between the Department of Foreign Affairs and Trade and the Department of State to monitor disinformation efforts, to counter state-sponsored and other malicious disinformation and interference. In terms of supporting the economic recovery in the region, we focused on the development of high-quality infrastructure investments, particularly through the Trilateral Infrastructure Partnership and other mechanisms, including the Papua New Guinea Electrification Partnership and also the proposed undersea cable for Palau with other partners, including, as I've said, Japan. We're looking at ways to mobilise private sector investment in the Indo-Pacific to deliver high-quality infrastructure and natural resource projects. When you meet Adam Bowler, the head of the DFC, the Development Finance Corporation in the United States, you absolutely know how focused the administration is on those high-quality infrastructure projects in the Pacific
Senator
and in
Payne,
Southeast Asia.
Time for the answers expired. Senator Patrick, a supplementary question.
Thank you, Mr President. In the run-up to this year's US election, what positive efforts have you and the Australian ambassador in Washington made to engage directly with Democratic presidential candidate Joe Biden's foreign policy team? What discussions have you or Ambassador Sinodinos had with Mr Biden's senior foreign policy advisers, for example, former Deputy Secretary of State Tony Blinken or former Deputy National Security Advisor to the Vice President and East Asia expert Ellie Ratner?
Senator Payne.
Thank you very much, Mr President. I thank Senator Patrick for his supplementary. Can I start, Mr President, by saying what an exceptional job former Senator Sinodinos is doing as Australia's ambassador in the United States, dealing with the significant challenges that COVID-19 brings, both to the operational aspects of an embassy, particularly a large embassy like that in Washington, but importantly the significant challenges it brings to the management of any bilateral relationship and those engagement issues. Ambassador Sinodinos has been exceptional in his outreach across Washington, and I see that in every interaction I have and every engagement I have. Senator Patrick, it would not usually be the case that a minister would canvass in public discussions had with representatives across the political sphere in any country. But I can say, Senator, that on my previous visit to Washington just in March of this year, I know that a number of those mentioned in Senator Patrick's question participated in a very diverse roundtable discussion with foreign
Senator
policy
Payne,
experts,
time
and I
for the
particularly
answer
appreciated their insights.
Expired. Senator Patrick, a final supplementary.
Thank you, Mr President. Joe Biden's former foreign policy platform says that he aims to, quote, to win the competition for the future against China. Mr Biden's East Asia advisor, Mr Ratner, wants Australia to increase defence spending to help blunt China's regional power. How do you think a Biden administration will deal with China? How might that differ from President Trump? And what do you expect a Biden administration will ask of Australia?
Senator Payne.
Thank you very much, Mr President. I thank Senator Patrick for his question. I think no matter from whom any exhortation to Australia comes in terms of defence spending, we have a very, very significant reply, and it's called the Defence Strategic Update. Secondly, I would say that the United States' relationship with China and vice versa is a matter, of course, for each of those countries, not for Australia. And it's a matter for any US administration, no matter who is the elected US administration. What I would say, though, Mr President, in relation to the Indo-Pacific is where we both live, the United States and Australia. It's the home of our greatest responsibilities. It's the home of our most compelling priorities. And what we do, our work through AUSMIN and our bilateral relationship, is all about making the most meaningful contributions we can to foster a better Indo-Pacific, an Indo-Pacific that is open and secure and prosperous and based on the rule of law.
Senator Chandler.
Thank you, Mr President. My question is to the Minister for Families and Social Services, Senator Ruston. Can the minister update the Senate on how the Morrison government is guaranteeing essential services and ensuring people with disability have equal opportunities on our road to economic recovery?
Minister for Families and Social Services, Senator Ruston.
Thank you very much, Mr President, and thanks Senator Chandler for her question. The government is absolutely committed to ensuring that people that live with disability are included in all aspects of community and also making sure that we provide them with the equal opportunity that they deserve. We recognise that part of that has got to be making sure that we are well informed about the requirements of people with disability, and that's why research funding is so important in achieving understanding as well as being able to achieve good outcomes. And that's why we recently announced a partnership with the Melbourne University Melbourne Disability Institute at the Melbourne University of Melbourne, a national disability research partnership. The government is providing $2.5 million in seed funding to establish this partnership, which will focus on disability and mainstream services, including such things as health, education, housing and justice. So over the next 2 years, this partnership will prepare and progress a research agenda, a research capability roadmap and practical guides for disability-inclusive research into partnerships with the disability community. We recognise that data and evidence is absolutely essential when it comes to developing good policy and evidence-based policy. And that's why we provided a further $15 million to make sure that we can develop a national disability data asset. This asset will help governments across the whole country, as well as policymakers, understand how people with disability are supported through services, through payments and through programs across the multiple levels of services and service systems that exist within this country at many levels, including state and federal. And through the sharing of this de-identified data through the data asset will allow governments to better understand the life experiences and outcomes for people with disability. We believe that this is an essential part of developing an inclusive and equal opportunity for all Australians, including those with disability.
Order. Senator Chandler, a supplementary question.
Thank you, Mr President. Can the minister update the Senate on how the government is supporting scholarship opportunities for regional and remote Australians with disability?
Senator Ruston.
Thank you very much, Mr President. Well, clearly, getting a job and keeping a job is an absolute game changer for anybody, no matter where they live or who they are in this country, and it shouldn't be any different for somebody who lives with a disability. And that's why we have partnered with the ABC to showcase the incredible work of our up-and-coming content makers who live with disability, and to help increase the employment opportunities for those people. This program is now in its 3rd year, and the program, Regional Storyteller Scholarship, offers $60,000 worth of funding to provide opportunities for regional Australians with disability to undertake a scholarship with the ABC. This scholarship provides opportunities for people to further their career aspirations in content making, and allowing them to showcase their skills and experience through a wide range of avenues that are offered through the ABC. And can I take this opportunity to congratulate this year's scholarship winners who were announced in June, and I'd encourage anybody who wants to be part of it to apply for next year.
Order. Senator Chandler, a final supplementary question.
Thank you, Mr President. Can the minister update the Senate on the government's plans for a new national disability strategy?
Senator Ruston.
Thank you very much, Mr President. Well, the next National Disability Strategy will be laid out by governments across Australia about how we can work together, state and territory and federal government, to make the lives of people with disability as best as we possibly can. So we're working with the states and territories on the new strategy, and I recently released a position paper which has kicked off the 2nd stage of the consultations. The position paper outlines the key features that we are proposing to include in the new strategy, and is informed by the previous strategy and the successes and some of the not successes of the previous strategy. We are inviting all Australians, whether they live with disability, have experienced with disability or whether they don't, to have their say in this position paper, because we want to make sure that the next National Disability Strategy, as informed as it possibly can be, to make sure that it provides the support and the initiatives for people who live with disability, and to make sure that our next strategy is the best strategy it can be.
Senator McAllister.
Thank you, Mr President. My question is to the Minister for Families and Social Services, Senator Ruston. Yesterday the minister claimed, and I quote, "We have to put the incentives back in place so people can start engaging with the job market." Given there are 13 job seekers for every 1 job vacancy, what jobs does she want the 1 million unemployed Australians to engage with?
The Minister for Families and Social Services, Senator Ruston.
Thank you very much, Mr President, and I thank Senator McAllister for her question. Well, quite clearly, Senator McAllister, the decision that was made by this government and announced in the July Economic Financial Update for the extension of a number of measures, whether it be the JobKeeper extension or whether it be the extension of the coronavirus supplement, recognise the fact that we understand that the job market is still very, very shallow. That is not to say that the jobs market has not improved, and it continues to improve with new jobs being created, but I will absolutely agree that the jobs market in Australia remains very shallow, and it's particularly evident in a state like Victoria, where and I have to say acknowledge the Victorian economy and the people of Victoria are going through an extremely difficult time, with the stage 4 lockdowns having a massive impact on their economy, but also on the livelihoods and the well-being of people who live in Victoria. But notwithstanding that, Senator McAllister, through you, Mr Chair, the rest of Australia, 7 out of the 8 states and territories of Australia, are starting to see their economies open up as restrictions are lifted, and hopefully we'll see the restrictions lifted even further, and we will start seeing the jobs that we want to see return to the economy come back again. But we as a government remain committed to have elevated levels of support for people across the whole of the economy going forward. These announcements have already been made in recognition of the fact of the circumstances that are before us at the moment. But we do, and we make no apology for saying to people who find themselves unemployed, we want you to start engaging with the jobs market. We want you to start understanding what opportunities might be out there at the moment. There are areas in our economy where we are seeing significant new jobs being created, and I think Senator Cash actually pointed out a minute ago about the number of jobs that have been created over recent times, and we will continue to support the Australian people through this pandemic.
Senator McAllister, a supplementary question.
Thank you. The same day the national accounts showed the biggest quarterly contraction on record, household consumption plummeting and business investment tanking, the minister claimed, and I quote, "Across much of the economy, we are starting to see the green shoots." Can the minister explain to the 1 million unemployed Australians and the 400,000 Australians expected to lose their jobs by Christmas where to find these green shoots?
Senator Ruston.
Well, look, thank you very much, Mr President. And I'd just like to point out that the basis of the question that has been put forward, that the accounts that were presented yesterday reflected the economic conditions that followed the shutdown of the Australian economy in March, following the states and territories' decision to shut down borders, close down their economies, and yesterday our national accounts reflected that. And I don't think there's anybody in this place that would disagree with the fact that the results that we saw yesterday had a devastating impact on the Australian economy and the lives and livelihoods of many in it. But to suggest that there are not the opportunities starting to open up in our economy, the jobs figures that were quoted a minute ago by the minister who has responsibility for employment, Senator Cash, saying that there are jobs coming back into the market. What we as a government want is we want people to actually realise that we are doing everything we can to make sure
Senator
jobs
Ruston,
are
time
created.
for the answers expired. Senator McAllister, a final supplementary.
Thanks, Mr President. Australians are living through the worst economic recession since the Great Depression. Wages are declining and 600,000 Australians have been forced to drain their super completely. Why is the minister telling unemployed Australians to engage with jobs that don't exist while refusing to use her power to maintain support and cutting back payments for the 1.5 million Australians relying on them?
Senator Ruston.
Thank you very much, Mr President. Well, I mean, I think Senator McAllister obviously clearly hasn't listened to what I have been saying. I have not denied that the jobs market is very shallow. I have merely suggested that the people who find themselves unemployed should be, especially in the states and territories where we are seeing job creation starting to come back online, that they should be starting to engage with the jobs market to see if there are jobs out there that are available to them. And to continue to perpetuate this myth about us making cuts, I would reaffirm to you we have continued the support that we have had in place by extending the coronavirus supplement past the end of September. And in fact, I'll acknowledge that even Senator Gallagher said, we argued for it to be extended, and it has been extended. I mean, those opposite obviously acknowledge the fact that we have extended the supplement. And now to come into this place and to say otherwise, I'm not quite sure what you actually want.
Order. Senator Henderson.
Thank you very much, Mr President. My question is to the Minister for Defence, Senator Reynolds. Can the minister outline how the Morrison government is keeping Australians safe by ensuring the Australian Army has the firepower, mobility and protection it needs on the modern battlefield?
The Minister for Defence, Senator Reynolds.
Thank you very much, Mr President, and I thank Senator Henderson not only for her question but for her passion and her relentless commitment to defence industry in Victoria. Mr President, the first role of this government, and indeed any government, is to keep Australia and also Australians safe. That's why this government is investing $270 billion over the next decade into upgrading our defence capabilities, and this includes $55 billion into new land capabilities. This will ensure our land forces have greater lethality, greater range, greater mobility and, most importantly, greater survivability for our troops. We must equip our army to deter potential adversaries in our region and also be able to respond with credible force. That's why this government is investing in strike weapons, watercraft, helicopters, armoured fighting vehicles, logistic capabilities and also emerging robotics and autonomous systems. Our region's challenging environment also demands that our army can fight across a range of different domains and a range of regions. Thanks to this coalition government, the ADF now has an outstanding amphibious capability centred on our two magnificent Canberra-class LHDs. Larger and more capable Army watercraft will support rapid regional deployment of ADF land capabilities, and they will be capable of independent and also task force operations. These investments and the many more that we've outlined in the Force Structure Plan are essential to our nation, and they're essential to Australia maintaining our capability edge.
Senator Henderson, a supplementary question.
Can the minister provide an update to the Senate on the self-propelled Howitzer project and how this project is supporting jobs in my home state of Victoria and the great city of Geelong?
Senator Reynolds.
Thanks, Mr President, and again thanks Senator Henderson for that great enthusiasm for the Greater Geelong region. Mr President, today I was pleased to announce that Defence will shortly release a request for tender to Hanwha Defence Australia to build and also to sustain over the longer term 30 self-propelled howitzers in Geelong. This is an important next step in progressing the Morrison's government 2019 election commitment to provide this essential capability for Army. This will create up to 350 jobs, and by reviving this project that Labor so scandalously cancelled, this government is ensuring our Army has the combat power it needs. It is this Morrison government that is ensuring Australian industry involvement in the delivery of this capability over the next decade, and that means jobs for Australians.
Senator Henderson, a final supplementary question.
Thank you, Mr President. Can the minister provide an update to the Senate on the Hawkeye project and how this project is also supporting jobs in my home state of Victoria and the great city of Bendigo?
Senator Reynolds.
Well, we've got the trifecta. Thank you very much, Mr President. The great passion for Senator Henderson for Bendigo as well. But today, Mr President, I also announced that the ADF's new Australian-designed and Australian-built Hawkeye light protected mobility vehicle will enter full-rate production. That is 50 vehicles per month. Hawkeye production by Thales Australia will sustain over 200 jobs in Bendigo and an additional 180 nationwide. But most importantly, the Hawkeye will again better protect the lives of our Australian soldiers. Hawkeye has provided vital business continuity for many small businesses in Victoria, and particularly important during this time as Victoria deals with the COVID-19 outbreak. And Mr President, this is yet another wonderful example of Defence and Australian industry managing business practices in a COVID-safe environment so we can continue to deliver Australian ADF capability.
Senator O'Neill.
Very much, Mr President, and my question without notice is to the Minister for Aged Care and Senior Australian, Senator Colbeck. News Corp newspapers revealed in reports this morning that more than 100 older Australians are being raped, assaulted and even murdered in this minister's aged care system every week. with more than 50,000 incidences of assault and abuse going unreported each year. Advocacy group Aged Care Crisis has found, and I quote, "Aged care residents in nursing homes have been raped, robbed, bathed in kerosene, attacked by rodents, suffering injuries or death from other residents, burnt to death, strangled, cooked, melted, sedated to death, over-medicated or choked to death." Is the minister going to ignore these warnings?
The Minister for Senior Australians and Aged Care, Senator Colbeck.
Thank you, Mr President. I thank Senator for the question. And the government isn't and hasn't been ignoring those warnings. In fact, this government has continued to act to reform the aged care sector, including, Mr President, the calling of the Royal Commission, which is currently investigating in a forensic manner the aged care sector, Mr President. But while the Royal Commission's being undertaken, we have continued to act to reform the aged care sector, Mr President. So, beginning from July last year, we've had the new aged care quality standards that we've put in place, Mr President. We've instituted a new Charter of Rights for residents in residential aged care. We've completed the legislative process to bring together the Aged Care Quality Safety Commission as one entity, and that entity began its work as a single entity on the 1st of January this year, Mr President. So we have continued to act in a reform sense as the Royal Commission has continued. And in respect of the story in the media this morning, I mean, those things are clearly unacceptable. Clearly unacceptable. And that's why, Mr President, we've progressed the work on the Serious Incident Response Scheme. And in that Serious Incident Response Scheme, we've incorporated some things that didn't exist previously, including resident-on-resident attacks, which a lot of these issues that were reported this morning are, Mr President. We've included home care into the Serious Incident Response Scheme, Mr President, and we actually brought forward the funding. Instead of waiting until the budget in October this year, we announced the funding for the progression of the Serious Incident Response Scheme in June this year, because we understand that it's an important piece of work and we wanted to make sure that it was being progressed, Mr President. So not only do we recognise these issues, we understand that they're not acceptable, but we continue to reform the sector to improve the outcomes for residents in residential aged care and aged care across the sector.
O'Neill, a supplementary
I have
question.
to say reform hasn't been going too well so far. The CEO of Pain Australia quit the Morrison government's Aged Care Quality Advisory Council because she found, and I quote, "The focus was not about quality at all, and it just really fell short of the mark. Why do older Australians have to suffer the consequences of a minister who keeps falling short of the mark?"
Senator Colbeck.
Thank you, Mr President. The individual that is mentioned by the Senator actually, as I understand it, resigned from the previous incarnation of the Quality Advisory Councils over 2 years ago. Mr President, there is a new Quality Council in place now under a new framework, Mr President, and it is operating quite differently, Mr President. So it's all very well for Senator to bring up historical events, but Mr President, as I said in my previous answer, we have continued to reform this sector. The new Aged Care Quality and Safety Commission, which commenced in its new form on the 1st of January this year, is operating in a different way. We are providing additional powers, and some of those powers have occurred during the COVID-19 outbreak, Mr President, and we continue to look and work with the Quality and Safety Advisory Council on what additional powers might be required for the Commissioner to utilise.
Senator O'Neill, a final supplementary question.
Thank you, Mr President. As a result of the horrific reality of the minister's aged care system, including ants crawling in wounds, loved ones left abandoned for hours, and families who've lost mothers, fathers, grandmas, granddads, the Senate has actually censured the minister. When will the minister resign and give his portfolio to someone who won't fall short of the mark and might be capable of getting it right?
Senator Colbeck.
Thank you, Mr President. What I will continue to do and what the government will continue to do is the work that we have been doing in reforming and improving the aged care sector in this country. Mr President, had the senator listened to the answers that I gave to the first two answers, she would understand that that work has been occurring and continues to occur. And not only that, Mr President, we act with appropriate urgency to ensure that these reforms continue. And, Mr President, it was this government that called the Royal Commission into aged care, Mr President. There's been members on the other side trotting around the place saying that they supported it when they didn't. In fact, they called into doubt whether we actually needed an aged care Royal Commission, Mr President. So this government has and continues to act while the Royal Commission continues to reform the sector, to improve it so that senior Australians get the care that they deserve in residential home care and in home care.
Senator McMahon.
Thank you, Mr President. My question is to the Minister representing the Minister for the Environment, Senator Birmingham. Can the Minister please update the Senate on how the Morrison government is investing in Australia's national parks to provide short-term economic stimulus that leaves long-term environmental and economic benefit to industries such as tourism?
The Minister representing the Minister for the Environment, Senator Birmingham.
Thanks, Mr President. I thank Senator McMahon for her question. And indeed, our government is investing a record $233 million in Commonwealth national parks to maintain their status as global icons of Australia, but importantly to drive and create job opportunities, especially in the Northern Territory, where indeed our iconic national parks primarily sit. $233 million being funded over 3 years to support specific projects across Uluru-Katajuka National Park, Kakadu, Booderee and Christmas Island National Parks, as well as the Australian National Botanic Gardens. These parks are internationally renowned, especially those in the Northern Territory, as key tourism, cultural and ecological destinations. The funding, Mr President, will support critical growth in employment with the creation of over 1,100 jobs in regional and remote areas as a result of this investment and work. It will be vital economic stimulus for those communities, providing an opportunity for our national parks, together with local industry and communities, to be revitalised following the COVID-19 pandemic, to ensure that we invest in their strong recovery, to encourage strong tourism visitation to those regions once international travel is available again, to help drive the tourism businesses and regional economies there to recover strongly from the heavy impacts. The investment is in addition to the $216 million already committed to growing tourism in Kakadu National Park and the waiving of park entry fees that our government introduced. The work involved will provide some 1,114 estimated jobs, some 564 during the construction phase, a further 550 indirect jobs in manufacturing, hospitality and transport businesses. We recognise that these parks form the lifeblood of many communities, the lifeblood of the tourism industry in the Northern Territory, and that's why we are investing that to support the industry and support the Territory through these tough times.
Senator McMahon, a supplementary question.
Wonderful news indeed, Minister. How does this investment complement other support being provided to Territorians in my Northern Territory?
Senator Birmingham.
Well, thanks, Mr President. Indeed, our support for the Northern Territory is strong in delivering the support for the national parks through the JobKeeper and JobSeeker program. We're supporting, indeed through JobKeeper, more than 5,000 organisations in the Northern Territory have received more than $200 million in support and funding to sustain jobs and employment during the pandemic. Our government's also provided support to individuals and households, and indeed the business support, seeing more than $180 million paid out in credits across the Territory. Our freight assistance mechanism has helped the Territory by establishing an air bridge between Darwin and Brisbane that can enable necessary freight, be that mud crabs heading into Asia or soon into the mango season. We will see Territory produce headed from Darwin to Brisbane and then onto flights across the region and out into the world, sustaining jobs and export for Territorians and the Territory.
Order. Senator McMahon, a final supplementary question.
Thank you, Mr President. Minister, it's great to hear that we will be able to have our mango daiquiris. Minister, how important is tourism to jobs in Australia?
Senator Birmingham.
Well, Mr. President, around 1 in 13 Australian jobs depended upon our tourism and hospitality sectors as we head into the pandemic. And sadly, many of those businesses, many of those jobs have been unavoidable victims of shutdowns and restrictions across the country. But their potential recovery is being hampered and impeded by the disproportionate maintenance of blanket border restrictions across the country. Mr. President, let me acknowledge, though, the wise words of Mr. Albanese on this topic. Back at the time of the debate about Virgin Australia, he said hundreds of thousands employed in the tourism sector depend upon a viable two-airline industry as an essential component of an effective tourism industry in Australia. Well, Mr. President, what else do you need for a viable tourism industry? You need routes that planes can fly on and states that people can travel between. And, Mr. President, I would now urge Mr. Albanese to lend his voice to support. Don't just leave it to Paul Keating. Don't leave it to Paul Keating to stand up for the tourism industry or open borders. Let Mr. Albanese.
Senator Birmingham, time for the answer has expired. Order. Only a few minutes to go, everyone. Senator Wong.
Thank you, Mr. President. My question is to the Minister for Aged Care and Senior Australia, Senator Colbeck. In June, the minister announced a serious incident report scheme would be operational in 2021. In fact, today in question time, the minister referenced this announcement as an example of his actions. Can the minister confirm the establishment of this scheme will be 4 years after it was first recommended in 2017? Can the minister explain to the Senate why he and the Morrison government have taken 4 years to heed the warnings of the Elder Abuse, a National Legal Response report, and establish the scheme?
The Minister for Aged Care and Senior Australians, Senator Colbeck.
Thank you, Mr. President. The point that I made earlier in question time was that rather than wait until the budget for the announcement of funding for the Serious Incident Response Scheme, my initiative and my imperative, Mr. President, was to ensure that that work could commence immediately, Mr. President. So, Mr. President, that's why, when I had the opportunity to ensure that this funding was available, $23 million for the implementation of the Serious Incident Response Scheme, I took the opportunity to ensure that occurred, Mr. President. As I said in my answer to a previous question today, the incidents that we've seen, the incidents that have occurred, are not acceptable, Mr. President. They're not acceptable. And that's why we've incorporated into the Serious Incident Response Scheme resident-on-resident assaults, which previously hadn't been part of the program, Mr. President.
Order.
And that's
Senator
why
Wong,
we've
on a point of
expanded
order.
it.
Mr. President, I raise a point of order, direct relevance. The question went to why it's taken 4 years.
The question was quite lengthy, Senator Wong. I think the minister talking about the activity he claims to have undertaken is directly relevant to. Excuse me. I try from the chair to use non-pejorative phrases on questions and answers. He is being directly relevant, talking about his program of work and activity. Senator Colbeck.
Thank you, Mr. President. And so my action was to make sure that this funding was available quickly, that it was available to continue the scheme. It was to ensure that, Mr. President, that resident-on-resident incidents were included in the scheme, and, Mr. President, also to ensure that the scheme covered home care, which it didn't previously, Mr. President. So I have, all through my time in this portfolio, put this as one of the important things that I wanted to ensure that we achieve. And so I made sure that the funding was available and announced in June rather than waiting until the budget came down in October. And I will continue to pursue this as an important measure for the government and for those who are residing in residential aged care, but also, Mr. President, importantly, those who are receiving home care services.
Senator Wong, a supplementary question.
Thank you, Mr. President. This minister has ignored the 2018 Aged Care Workforce Strategy, the 2019 Aged Care Royal Commission interim report entitled Neglect, warnings from the Northern Hemisphere, warnings from experts and unions, warnings from Dorothy Henderson Lodge in March and Newmarch House in April. Isn't the 2017 Elder Abuse a National Legal Response Report just another warning this minister has ignored?
Senator Colbeck.
Thank you, Mr President, and I completely reject the premise of Senator Wong's question. This government has continued to act to progress the interests of residents in aged care across the country. We called the Royal Commission, Mr President, into residential aged care because we wanted a forensic investigation of the entire residential aged care sector. And, Mr President, we have continued to reform the sector while the Royal Commission is being conducted, despite the Royal Commission saying that they didn't want to be investigating a moving target, Mr President. So we've continued the important reforms like the Serious Incident Response Scheme, important reforms like the new Code of Conduct for residential aged care residents, like the new quality standards for residential aged care across the board, and including the creation of the new Aged Care and Quality Safety Commission. So, Mr President, I have and this government has continued to reform this sector while the Royal Commission is doing its work, and we look forward to its report in February next year.
Final supplementary question.
Thank you, Mr President. This minister has ignored warning after warning, failed to plan, failed to act urgently, and as a result he has lost the confidence of the Australian people and the confidence of the Senate. Today in the House of Representatives, Mr Morrison, the Prime Minister, couldn't bring himself to express confidence in this minister. So I ask this minister, when will you resign?
Senator Colbeck.
Thank you, Mr President. Again, I reject the premise of Senator Wong's question. And what I will do is what I've said I will do in previous questions during question time today. I will continue to work in the interests of senior Australians. I will continue to bring reforms forward to government, as I have done during my tenure, and I will continue to work to ensure that senior Australians, through the COVID-19 pandemic, have access to the resources and the support that they need, Mr President, in ensuring that they get an appropriate level of care throughout the COVID-19 pandemic. And, Mr President, $1.5 billion as a result of my interventions and work with the ERC and the government is a clear demonstration of the fact that I take this role seriously, and I will continue to do just that.
Senator Cormann.
I ask that further questions be placed on a notice paper.
Thanks.